So now when people call your office and someone else in the office gets your lead, how does that work out?
Well, that is an evil that I haven't yet figured out how to overcome. So in my personal growth, I learned that when I don't have a plan and I fly by the seat of my pants, I always crash and burn. But when I have a plan and I have a plan of attack for every day, it's kind of hard to fail.
Welcome back to another episode of the Intrepidus Podcast, episode number 15 with your hosts, Dan and Anthony. Today we got a special guest, JT from Hazelet Realty Group. It took me a bunch of tries to get that one right. I'm glad you're on the show.
Thank you guys for having me, and you got that one right. So you got him right when it counted.
I appreciate it. So yeah, tell us a little bit about what you do, JT.
So I'm a real estate advisor. I work with my family's brokerage, Hazelet Realty Group. We have an office in Brick and Garnegat. Personally, I like to work with first-time home buyers and/or investors, but I really like teaching first-time home buyers how to become investors.
So before we got onto the pod today, we talked a little bit about what you do and your story, and what really interests us is how you got here, and a lot of which came from the requirement of being the person that you are today.
Yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I was young and dumb like everybody else here was at one point. But I found out when I was 19 that my girlfriend, who's now my fiance, was expecting our first child, Lucas. At the time, this is actually a funny story. The day I found out we were expecting, I also got fired from my job at Dick's Sporting Goods that I made $14 an hour at. So I was on a really good path there. We could say
It was steal a baby off his, didn't have the baby yet.
Yes, exactly. And I got fired for being late. If that's actually the type of employee that I was, there you go too. But from there, I had to figure out what I was going to do. And at the time, I was in class to get my real estate license. My father, who owns owns Hazelet Realty Group, suggested I get my license. Once I found out about my son, though, he suggested, as also somebody who had a kid, Nate, at 20, you're going to need to make money a little bit sooner than you will in real estate. He always tells everybody that it takes 6 months to a year to really get started with real estate. Even if you get licensed now, you're probably not going to get a sale for 6 months or so. Knowing that I had a son coming, like he told me, I needed some money to come in. So I started selling cars. That's how I got started in sales. I did that for about a year, 2 years. Met Tom Arabella, who hired me to sell marketing services, websites, SEO, social media. After working for him for about a year, I decided to open up my own marketing company and move down to Florida, which was great timing because 6 months later, COVID happened. So I shut down from COVID after moving my girlfriend at the time and my 2-year-old son to Florida. I had to pack us right back up and move back home, which honestly I say all the time, and I think we were talking about it before, Anthony, it was a blessing in disguise.
Sure.
Because when I came home, it was the same time my dad decided to go out on his own and open up Hazelet Realty Group. He suggested, hey, I know you gave it a crap once. Why not try real estate again and actually get licensed this time? And here we are. Rest is history.
Did it take you the 6 months to, well, first off, I think that's fantastic advice. And actually the first time I'm ever hearing that somebody goes out of their way and says, as a mentor of sorts, to say, hey, you'd be expecting not to make a dime for 6 months to a year because that's the industry requirement.
Absolutely.
So did you have to face that one? How do you overcome that adversity too? And 3, do you think that's true?
Yeah, so to answer almost in reverse, yes, that's 100% true. We still say, and even now with the agents that come in that I get to mentor a little bit, I tell them the same thing. Like, hey, the first couple months, you're really going to work your circle. You're going to do your best in learning everything there is to learn about real estate, which you could do it for 20 years and still not know everything. So don't expect to know everything before you start talking to people. Yes, I had to go through that for sure. I don't think I got my first transaction. I won't even say sale because it was a rental until about 6 months in. And I got that just by being in the office. Like I was just hanging in the office because that's something that we teach is being in the office. If you're not actively working with somebody, you at least learn on the MLS, study the MLS, learn from the agents that are doing business around you, things like that. And just being there at the time, I was the only agent in the office. The phone rang, I answered it. I got rental lead out of it.
Awesome. So how did you go from the Dick's employee to working for a marketing company? Now you say, you know what? I'm not going to work for this marketing company. I'm going to own my own company. What made you mentally make that shift?
Well, really what made me mentally make the shift was, one, I really wanted to move to Florida. That for whatever reason in that time in my life, that's what I wanted to do. And in moving to Florida, I decided I'm probably going to be best off in working for myself rather than starting at the bottom with someone else. At the time, I was working, like I said, for Wingman Planning, the marketing company. I saw within myself I was very good at sales. I was good at establishing relationships, and I was good at explaining to people and almost making it their idea to buy whatever I was selling. I recognized that, and I thought I could probably continue to be good at this. I just need somebody to build the websites, do the SEO, and post on social media. So I outsourced to the company that I worked for and went out and sold on my own. And honestly, it worked pretty well. And so,
So what kind of fears did you have going into business for yourself? Because I know, like, when you work for somewhere, you got a steady paycheck, different mindset. Now you're like, oh shit, it's going to cost me money before I make money. How did that feeling bind up inside of you, and what kind of fears did you have?
well, the biggest fear I had was the fear of the unknown because I'd never done it before. And at that time in my life, I was a little headstrong, and I wasn't as willing to lean on others for advice as I am now. So at the time, my biggest fear was just not knowing and trying to figure it out on the fly, because that's how I did everything at the time. Probably part of the reason why I fell down was the way that it did. But you know, you live and you learn.
So I want to step back for a second. You said that you didn't get anything, you didn't get your first transaction until at least 6 months. And the two biggest hurdles that we hear all the time is I don't have enough time to do something, or I can't afford to do something. Mainly because there's a variety of different reasons, right? But a lot of which come from I have family obligations, or I have rent, or I have a car payment, so on and so forth. You just had a child. Well, you had a child that was 2-3 years old at the time.
Right.
Young. You had someone that you had to support. You just moved back. During that time, what did you do? How did you overcome that adversity?
Well, that's a fantastic question. And honestly, nobody's ever asked me that before. But what I have to say, I had a really good support system. So when I moved home, I was able to move in with my parents. And my fiance now was able to move back in with her parents until we were able to figure out what we were going to do in moving back. So I give a lot of credit to both of our parents for honestly being willing to take us in with their grandchild and really help us balance going back and forth. Because there were times where, like you just said, that time, especially when you're a business owner, it's a finite resource. So you kind of have to focus a lot on, especially when you're new in business, getting in front of people, learning the business that you're in, and putting those two together. So during that time, I was lucky enough to have people where I was able to say, hey, I had a networking event from 5 to 7. Can you hang out with Lucas today? Or, hey, I'm going to be in the office making cold calls today all day. And Gina, I know that you're going to be at work all day, but Gina's my fiance. But can you just stay with Lucas for the night? Like I'll pick him up first thing in the morning. And it was very uncomfortable at the time. I didn't like being away from my family. I didn't like being away from my son as much as I was, but I saw the light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, where I figured, okay, I know 6 to 12 months is what they say, and I'm 6 to 12 months in at this point, but I'm like, if I really put my nose down and grind for the rest of the time, I know at the end of the tunnel, I won't have to miss out on the things that I'm missing out on now. So
One thing about being successful, you just said it, you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
oh, yes, sir.
Did I hear correctly that when you guys moved back, Gina went to her parents' house and you went to your parents' house?
Yes, sir.
So how was that? Like, you were living with her and your child. Now you were splitting up because of the situation of whatever it was.
Right.
And how difficult was it not being there every day with her and your child?
Honestly, one of the worst periods I can describe to you, just because of how uncomfortable it was. But like you just said, you have to learn how to be uncomfortable. And one of the things that I now take away from that time period is how much more we value being with each other, because we know our relationship is strong enough to go through something like that. And now on the flip side is we missed each other that whole time, and we knew what we had and what we were working on building. So to almost fall down a little bit there, I feel like the build back has been 10 times better than what it would have been if that never happened.
So you're 26. I've been connected with you for some time.
Yes, sir.
I listen to you speak. I listen to you present, different videos and different stuff you do. And clearly, when I hear you speak, I know that you do personal development.
Yes, sir.
when did you start personal development, and why do you feel it's important?
I started personal development about a year or so into being into real estate. And I really started that because I realized at that time, I was about 24 or so. I really realized that I didn't have all the answers. And then if I really wanted to succeed, like I wanted to be in the top 1%, I'd have to learn how to deal with others better, how to take advice better. And doing that, I had to self-scout and realize what I wasn't good at. And I was an athlete my whole life. I played baseball, so I was always able to take constructive criticism. And I knew in baseball, if you fail 70% of the time, you're the best in the sport. So having the mindset of I'm going to fail all the time, but I could either fail all the time and either try to figure it out, or I could fail all the time and then lean on people to explain, here's where you fell short. Here's what you could have did different. Maybe look at it this way instead of like this, and maybe your outcome would have been different. So in having all of those experiences kind of tie in, brought me onto the personal growth path, I guess you could say.
How many strikeouts do you hit a home run? That's cool in here.
As many as it takes, right? Doesn't matter.
That's beautiful. I love that. But let's step back into the actual real estate,
Of course.
industry in its entirety. After those 6 months, so you had your first deal, your first transaction. How long after that before you actually gained some real track and you said, you know what, I actually have something here. I know this is the path where I can succeed. At what point did you get there, and what steps did you need to take after that first transaction to get there?
After the first transaction, I realized I got my first transaction, like I told you, by being in the office. The second transaction I got from a lead service, Realtor.com. It's common for most agents to have stuff like that. The third transaction I had was a friend of mine who I had a conversation with, and I explained kind of what we talked about earlier, how I learned from my mortgage lender that there are programs out there to help with down payment assistance, and there's ways to have sellers cover your closing costs. So your barrier to entry in real estate is a lot lower than what most people think. A lot of the common thinking today is you need 20% down, you need all these $100,000 to buy real estate. So when I was able to explain to him, not very well at the time, that you don't need much money, and then I was able to show him that, once I turned his idea from I can't buy a house to actually making it happen, that was when I was like, I feel like most people think the way he does, that you need all this money to buy a house. And, it's especially with the way that the real estate market has gone since I've been licensed over the last 3 years, which is just up at record paces. Everybody, or a lot of people, have felt that it's unattainable. So when I was able to make what seemed unattainable to him obtainable, I saw the light that I know I can do this for more people. And that's where I stopped focusing on the lead generation systems like the Realtors.coms and the Zillows, and I started focusing on the people that I knew, like my circle of people, because I know my circle of people probably doesn't know just as much as the people on Realtor.com. But I knew from sales that people like to work with who they know, like, and trust. So if I already knew, like, and trust people, and now I can teach them something, I already have a huge abundance of leads that I get to work with. And I don't have to really, not that I don't have to work for it, but I don't have to do all the painful work of sitting on the phone for 2 hours to get told to go F myself 50 times to get one person to say, come over to my house next Tuesday at 5. You know what I mean? Because those are the two.
So you just have to get told to go F yourself the first year and a half, 50 million times,
And then you get over.
and then you get over.
Yeah. It's like anything else though. With any type of sales or any business, you're going to get told no over and over again until you get a yes. So it doesn't matter if they tell you no once and then the second time you get a yes. Every no is one no closer to my yes.
They say every yes builds your business, every no builds you.
Yes, sir. I like that. I'm going to steal that from you, Dan.
I know. I asked all from somebody else.
Cool. It's like what they say. Who created the wheel? Nobody knows, but there's been thousands of wheels through thousands of years.
One of my favorite things Stan's ever said is nothing I say is original. Yeah.
I haven't had original thoughts since I've been in personal development. I like that. So you're the third realtor that we've actually had on Intrepidus, and one thing that I like to ask is everyone gets involved in real estate because they think it'll make you rich. Everyone's like, oh, I'm going to get my real estate license and I'm going to get rich.
And because it's easy.
Yeah. It's easy to sell a house. There's this whole misconception there. People just think, oh, I'm going to go take the test. I'm going to pass the test and I'm going to be rich. And I personally believe, just based on what I've learned from the people I've met and spoken to, 80 to 90% of people fail in that first 6 months to a year because like they're not getting a check. They don't realize that, you have to sacrifice so much, and they have that, I quit mentality because they're not getting paid versus having a high IQ, a high I quit mentality because at the end of the day, the road's a lot better.
Yes, sir. And the one thing I see this now all the time because I have a little bit of part in the interview process at Hazelet Realty Group. Not that I hire or fire anybody, but I get to meet people and I get to see what their objections to getting into real estate are. And what I find most common is exactly what you said. Most people think that they're going to come and almost like an employee be handed business. And that's the biggest misconception is even though I work for Hazelet Realty Group, or if you're a licensed agent, you work for whatever company you work for, you really work for yourself. You're a 1099 independent contractor. So Hazelet Realty Group isn't responsible for handing me leads and gaining my business. JT Hazelet's responsible for gaining JT Hazelet's business. So sure, Hazelet Realty Group will pass out leads, but those leads aren't to build my business. Those are to be a sprinkle on top of the business that I'm creating. And that's what most agents who just get started don't realize is I have to come in here and I have to work to build my business. I'm not going to walk in here and kind of like selling cars where 100 people throughout the day are going to walk through the door. You don't really get that in real estate because there's an actual statistic that every person, the 3 people sitting in this room, off the top of their head can name 10 different real estate agents.
Absolutely.
I believe that.
And if you thought harder, you could probably name more than 15. Like if you really thought about it for some time, you could probably get up to the 15 mark.
Then how do you choose which one to go with?
1, it's the top of mind. 2, it's the one that you know, like, and trust the most. And 3, the person that you think and believe can deliver you the results that you need.
Hey guys, quick interruption to the show. Please don't forget to follow us and like us.
You can find us on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that like button. We appreciate the algorithm. Thanks, guys.
Love you guys.
So 2017, when I had to use this guy, Sal, because he was doing exactly back then what you're doing now. He was marketing himself and, really putting himself out there. He was really hustling and really brand awareness. I actually thought Hazelet Realty Group was yours. I thought you were the owner. I thought you were the guy. You're the face out there. I watched the videos you put out, the content you put out, everything you put out. You're so consistent, and you have such a drive behind you. And if now today I was looking for something, you'd be the guy to talk to because every time I would pull my feet up, it's you, boom, behind the desk, talking about a video, why you should do this, why you should do that. And it's important to understand that most people are going to get involved in this industry and do that kind of stuff. They're going to be like, oh, where's my work? Where's my work? Right. Or they could be like you and wait for 6 months and answer the phone. But you're putting yourself out there. But my question to you is, you put yourself out there too much, and I thought this was your company. So now when people call your office and someone else in the office gets your lead, how does that work out?
Well, that is an evil that I haven't yet figured out how to overcome. The way that I justify it for myself is I'm a team player. Like I told you, I play baseball. So what's good for me is good for the team. So if I'm out there branding Hazelet Realty Group, every person who works for Hazelet Realty Group benefits. And we say the same thing. Keller Williams, Weicker, and all the big ones say the same thing. The power is the lawn signs. So every time that you guys go out, you see a Weicker sign, you see a Keller Williams sign. Do you look at who the agent is?
No.
Never. You just see, oh, look, Weicker has another listing. It's the same thing for Hazelet Realty Group. It's, you see a Hazelet Realty Group sign, or you see one of my videos, it's Hazelet. Sure, you think of me, and obviously I want you to call me. One day, Hazelet Realty Group will be mine. Not anytime soon. But like any other business, I need, as the person who eventually is going to take that over, I need it to grow. And so when it does take over, I'm taking something.
Does your dad do marketing like you or no?
He does marketing, but he does marketing differently.
So maybe I have a conversation with your dad, and unless you were to diversify yourself on that commercial or whatever you do, the videos, and say, hey, call Hazelet Realty Group and ask for JT, right?
Yes,
But at the end of the day, say, Dad, listen, I'm going to keep popping this out, and work something out, like, the tier system that some of these other companies have might be beneficial. And then, your dad could feed into you, maybe pay for a marketing team now, and instead of wasting money on some of the stuff that isn't working, get great videos, get great reels. You guys work together on it. It might be an idea.
That's a good one. That's honestly a really good one. And we do something similar to that. But I like where you're coming from there. And that's an idea. Definitely.
You see about $4 million sale, and it's like,
yeah, that guy got me off of Facebook, but you know, this other person got the sale, and you don't get a dollar.
And I do for my own, when I do put up those videos, I make sure in the caption, I put my phone number. I make sure I say, send me a DM, you know, things like that to try to make sure that when they see it, they see me. The other caveat to that is
Click the link.
or click the link.
Yeah,
right.
add a link that goes directly to like maybe a little page,
The educated
you know, some sort of questionnaire.
Yeah, that's good too. And I think I've actually talked to Tom from Wingman about doing that a few times. And if he's watching this, he's gonna be like, yeah, we should. But
Shameless plug.
exactly, shameless plug for Tom. But for sure, now, and the other thing that I do to make sure that the people who watch my videos don't go to Hazelet Realty Group is I only post it from my personal pages.
So
I don't post it. It's not like Hazelet Realty Group Facebook is posting it. Sometimes they'll share it, but they'll share it from my page. They won't be like, it won't be Hazelet Realty Group posting my video. It'll be more so than sharing my video, which ultimately ends up funneling to me anyway.
You said something interesting before we actually went live here. And well, there's a commonality between realtors when you ask the question of why they do, what do they love most about it. It's always, hand the keys over and see someone's face. It's an easy answer. Your answer was much different, and I appreciated it. So I wanted to elaborate. And your answer was more or less that you like to deliver a path to prosperity for your customers, clients. Whereas, you know, instead of just selling them the house, you want to sell them the house and then show them how they could turn that house into an investment and get their second or third or fourth house. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, sir. So I guess to go to my background a little bit, I come from a very working class span. Like my dad, before he started Hazelet Realty Group, was a pipe fitter, and every generation before that was a pipe fitter. And that's on my dad's side. On my mom's side, we ride Harleys and they drive big trucks all across the country. So in seeing that, I watched my entire life the hardest working people that I knew not have anything to show for it when they retire. And I say that lovingly. They're probably going to listen to this. So I say that lovingly. They worked harder than anybody that I have ever come across. I didn't have much to show for it. So when I learned about real estate and I saw, wow, I think Andrew Carnegie said that 90% of millionaires became millionaires by investing in real estate. That's the age-old saying. It's true, though. What else can you buy? And I before the podcast turned on, I explained to you how I like to help people buy houses with $0 out of pocket. So in that situation, even if you put down a small 3.5% on a $300,000 house, let's say between $0 and $10,000, what else can you turn a $0 or a $10,000 asset into a $300,000 asset like that? If you buy $10,000 of stocks, you get $10,000 of stocks, and your money appreciates off your $10,000. If you buy $10,000 worth of real estate, you get $300,000 worth of real estate, and your money appreciates off the $300,000. So when I learned those things, like I explained with my friend, the first person I sold, who I explained you could buy with no money out of pocket. When I learned that you could leverage your money that way, and you can buy money where you could buy a house with no money out of pocket, and then 3 years later turn around and sell it for a couple $100,000 gain. So why doesn't everybody do this? And the more I started to figure it out, it wasn't that people weren't interested in doing it. It was more so a lack of information on how to do it. Just the same way that the lack of information on that you could buy a house with no money in pocket. So to answer your question, I think that's where that drive came from. Was one, I saw my family not know this and they suffered, I guess, from it. Not that they suffered, but they weren't as prosperous as they could have been. Correct. So for myself, I was like, I want to be as prosperous as possible. I have a family I want to provide for. But at the same time, if I can help other people become prosperous, I'm going to become prosperous at the same time. And it's like I build my goals by helping other people build their goals. And when I really put that together, I think Alex said, somebody else you had on the podcast said, I get to put my head on the pillow every night knowing that I did good by people, not knowing that I screwed them over. You know, and to me, I think that's a lot different than just trying to be like, hey, that's your first house.
Talking about putting your head on the pillow, what keeps you up at night?
Other people's problems. So when I help people buy houses, a lot of times, and more so recently, my clients have been investors or first-time home buyers. So both come with unique problems. First-time home buyers, they want to get in mom's house. Their, rental that their lease is up in the next 2 weeks, and our closing day is 3 months out or 3 weeks out. And there's like, I don't know what to do here. I stay up because I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do for the week that these people don't have a house. That, like, are they gonna go in a hotel? Like, are they gonna go here? That keeps me up at night. Other than that, not much, because I trust myself in the work that I do every day, that I can be okay with what I accomplish during the day. So in my personal growth, I learned that when I don't have a plan and I fly by the seat of my pants, I always crash and burn. But when I have a plan, and I have a plan of attack, I call it, for every day, it's kind of hard to fail, because like you said, consistency. I'm consistent in the things that I do every day, and I know by listening to my mentors, and my mentors sharing what they do every day, which led them to where they are, and me starting to see the success in doing what I do every day, it makes it hard to not continue to want to do that, because I've seen both sides.
Fail the plan, find the fail.
Yes, sir.
So, you said your majority of your family's working class.
Yes, sir.
You're obviously an entrepreneur, and you're fairly new in this journey, but do you have any entrepreneurship that has traveled throughout your family?
Oh, for sure. On my mom's side, I have my grandfather, who just passed, but he left on a trucking business to his sons, my uncles, R. Ford and Sons Trucking. I think he owed that for a better part of 20, 30 years. I could be wrong on that, man, but he's always had that. My great-grandfather on my dad's side, he owned most of Bricktown at one point. He sold off a lot of the land that he owned. He owned a couple smaller businesses. I have other aunts and uncles who have landscaping businesses, and my step-parents, my stepmom's brother, so I guess my step-uncle, however you want to call him, he owns a financial company. So yeah, to say that entrepreneurship runs deep, it does, and I've been able to use each of those people that I had in my family to teach me something different about entrepreneurship, because they all sell something different.
So through childhood, seeing your great-grandfather and all the people who've done well and financially, had a different path in life, were you able to vision or see that, their lifestyle was just a little bit different than that person who was just working every day, passing by a job? And is that something that inspired you to be where you are right now?
100% it is. So when my dad was a steam fitter, before he got into real estate, he always used to tell me, you want to go to work in a suit, not a jumpsuit. Because he would go to work in a jumpsuit, and he'd have to climb up on top of the refinery, and he would tell me, especially this time of year, how terrible it was. And specifically during this time of year, he would always tell me, go to work in a suit, like your Uncle Michael. My Uncle Michael is the step-uncle who owns the financial brokerage. And when we would go to my Uncle Michael's house, we hung out on his boat and his big house on the water and all those things. And then we went to go hang out at some of my other uncle's house. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but we were, lots of smaller houses, no boats, things like that. Not that there's anything wrong one way or the other, but I think he did that to kind of show me, like, if you go to work in a jumpsuit, this is kind of what your life is going to end up looking like. And if you go to work in a suit, you have the opportunity to make your life look like this. And he used to try to say that to me. My dad's not a very direct person, so he used to try to show me those things and say those things to me, kind of like that.
He followed his own advice.
He did. And I think I remember the conversation when he told me that he was going to get his license, because after being unemployed for 2 years from the refinery, he came down and told me, my brother, hey, I'm going to get my license to do real estate. And I was like, you're going to go to work in a suit? And he said, yeah. I was like, it's about damn time, Dad. Jeez. And he laughs about that, but 100%. He took his own advice, and he's been wildly successful since then. So,
Yeah, so 3 years, I would say 2.5 years ago, you got your first transaction.
sir.
This year, you're going to close something around 24 closings or so.
Yeah.
What's next?
30, 40. Then actually what's next is not the number of transactions. It's getting into a different part of real estate, because real estate, there's so many different things to do. You can sell like I do. You could fix and flip. You could buy and hold. So the next avenue for me is to continue to sell, but also get involved in doing the investing. Because similar to what I told Dan before we started the podcast, one of the major reasons why I got involved in owning my own company was I saw the money that I was making for other people. And I was like, why not do that for myself? I see the same thing. I work with a lot of investors. I help them fix and flip houses. I help them find buy and holds. I do all the hard work in finding the deals already. Now I just have to have the deals for myself.
I think just following you and seeing what you're doing, and I mean, you're young, and there's not many 26-year-olds who are driven like you.
But,
Most of them are still sleeping on their mom's couch trying to figure out what bar you're going to tonight.
yes, sir.
But I think something ideal for you is if you can get the new up and coming real estate agents and train them to think like you, and almost have like a coaching program of some sort to be able to get people in the right mindset. I think ultimately you and your dad's business can be super, super successful. If you basically like create a culture training group, where people come in, this is what you need to know, this is what you need to expect, this is how I did it, versus like every other real estate company I see out there saying, oh, you got your, all right, come on over, fill out this form, we get a percentage of what you take. Oh, if you don't work, you don't make money, we don't care, because they want volume. But if you create the right amount of people and you have a good amount of core, you guys can actually make more money than another company that has hundreds of real estate agents there, because you're going to have people who are driving for a purpose.
Yes, sir. And we're being at the end of 2024 right now. That's on the chopping block of 2025. That's actually what we're talking about. I won't lie to you. I stole the idea from you and your mastermind that I still am angry about that I missed out on. But that was my fault, not yours. But I took that idea that you had and was like, why don't we do the same thing here? If we specify it to real estate, we have our, Hazelet Realty Group trainings on Fridays and all of that too, but that's for everybody now. My thought is exactly what you're saying. If we find some like-minded individuals, sky's the limit.
Yeah, masterminds will change the dynamic for everything in your life.
Yes, sir, because now you get a group of people all working towards one goal.
You articulate very well, apparently, your content, which I hadn't seen yet. Shame on me, but it's fantastic if Dan's checking it out. So I'm definitely going to tune in. But if everyone else wants to tune in, how could they find you?
Well, thank you for asking that. My Instagram is realestatingwithjt_. TikTok, which I put a lot of stuff out on, is just Real Estate with JT. If you want to be my friend on Facebook, it's just JT Hazelet, spelled like the name on the logo.
Awesome. Well, guys, listen, make sure you're following us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music. We appreciate it. Like and comment. It helps our algorithm. And JT, it was awesome to have you here as a guest today.
Guys, thank you so much for having me. Honored. Can't wait to hear it come out.
Awesome. Beautiful.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.